playoff time in the NHL. I'm back. I'm Nakash Kingley, joined by my co-hosts Darius and Matt. We're back to preview the Toronto Maple Leafs playing the Boston Bruins once again. The Bruins have home ice advantage. The Leafs do not. Not that it matters because the Leafs are, I believe, like a top 3 road team in the NHL this year.
Yep.
But as we know, how much do regular season stats matter in the playoffs? You never really know. But we will cover the Bruins side first because we have a lot to talk about the Leafs, of course. Matt, what happened in Boston over the course of this year, especially from the fallout from last season's playoffs?
Well, they lost, a key guy like Patrice Bergeron, David Krejci, but they still got the main core. They still got Brad Marchand, David Pastrnak, both goalies, Allmark and Swayman, even though Allmark almost went to Los Angeles, but that's a long story. They still have the core that lost to Florida last year, and they want to avenge that. Like they are not bouncing out in the first round. Like that's the mantra in that dressing room.
Yep. Charlie McAvoy too is back there.
Charlie, sorry, big name. So I've been a McAvoy truther for how long, and I forgot his name.
Yeah, Matt, you're such a fraud, buddy. But yeah, the Boston is good, but the centers is interesting because it's their first 2 centers are now Pavel Zacha and Charlie Coyle, who are going to be going against Austin Matthews and John Tavares. Now, I know if you look at the counting stats comparables, John Tavares is actually pretty comparable to both those centers this specific year. But for my money, I'm probably taking Tavares over them too. But looking at Boston, David Pastrnak, I believe, has 40 more points than Brad Marchand, who is second in scoring. So there is someone doing a lot of heavy lifting there, and it's going to be a lot of work for the Leafs to shut down. But Matt, for you, how is Boston this good? You look at their lineup, and everyone, I saw some Leafs fans tweeting, you guys are really scared of this. I'm not scared per se, but it's like you look at the lineup, it's like, how are they really this good? Everyone talks about how centers are the most important position in hockey. Yet they're running out these 4 centers, guys like Trent Frederick, Charlie Coyle, Pavel Zach, whoever their 4th-line center is, maybe Danton Heinen. I'm not sure. How are they this good?
I hate to use a cliche, but like that Bruins dressing room for the past like 15 years, it's been like tight knit. Like they play together as a team. They're not individuals. That is a team. Doesn't matter who the coach is, Jim Montgomery, Bruce Cassidy, but that leadership group, especially with Marchand and Pastrnak and McAvoy, like they get that team playing like consistently good hockey.
Always. Darius, what are you seeing from the Bruins going to a series against the Toronto Maple Leafs once again?
They play like a unit. They're fantastic together, and that's the reason why they're so good. And like Matt said, it's just the culture that they've built there, and it just continues no matter who comes in the door or not. It also has to do with fantastic goaltending. They have 2 really good goaltenders, and again, goaltending is going to be a factor in this series because the Bruins have better goaltending than the Leafs. It's just the way it is. So that's going to be interesting to watch too. But I do think a lot of the Bruins scoring does come mostly from one place. So I think, which wasn't always the case in the last couple of years. So I think it's going to be a lot easier. I don't want to use that word, but easier for the Leafs to kind of shut that down. But on the Bruins side, I think, you look at your defense and your goaltending, you're like, we could do this.
Of course they can. Now, let me correct myself about the lines. In the last game of the season where the Bruins lost to the Senators, this is subject to change. Their first line was Danton Heinen, Pavel Zacha, David Pastrnak.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't really, aside from Pastrnak, doesn't really move me too much. Second line, Brad Marchand. We know what he does in the playoffs. Charlie Coyle, Jake DeBrusk. Jake DeBrusk, noted Leaf playoff killer. The third line, familiar face, James Van Riemsdyk. He'll probably score 5 goals this series. Morgan Geekie and Trent Frederick. Then the 4th line is Jakob Lauko, Jesper Bockquist, and Jason Mann. I'm sure the 4th line will probably change. That forward group isn't anything too crazy. Danton Heinen is your first line left wing. Interesting. One thing about the Bruins though this year is, we know they were insane last year, 65 wins, arguably the best regular season team in history, based on wins. And defense, Grizzly, McAvoy, Lindholm, Peak, Walderspoon, and Kevin Shattenkirk is there, which I forgot about, to be honest. But Brandon Carlo also day-to-day, so he'll probably be in there as well. But what they didn't do this year, last year they brought in the trader for Tyler Bertuzzi and the trader for Dmitry Orlov. This year, they couldn't really make any deadline acquisitions because of the cap. So they're rolling with these guys. They didn't really change anything. This is the same team they started with. It's going to be the same team they end with. Do you guys think this is? Do you think defense and goaltending is that much better than the Leafs this year?
I'll let Darius lead off here.
The goaltending is 100%. It is, and it doesn't matter if one of their guys gets hurt because, well, unless it's last year and you don't take him out of the game or games. But it doesn't matter if one guy gets hurt. Your second goaltender or backup, quote unquote, whatever you want to call it, is better than the Leafs still. So I think goaltending, yes. Defense, yes, it is better than the Leafs. But is it that much better than the Leafs? I'm not sure. I think the Leafs can kind of compete with them. It's just that the Boston forward group is a bad matchup for the Leafs defense group. I think like forechecking and all that stuff, the mental game, all that stuff, and it's going to come down to the mental game, I think, this series, definitely. But I think in terms of that much better, goaltending, yes. The defense, not that much better, but yes, it's better.
Matt,
Now,
what do you think?
I've got more of a question for you guys related to Keith's deployment here. In recent years. Sorry, Nick. I'm sort of turning the tables on you here.
No, you're
In
fine,
recent
you're fine.
playoff years, he's kind of gotten out coached. Has he sort of gotten over that mental hump? Do you
I
think
have no idea.
you know you don't
Remains
know
to
no
be
what
idea.
seen. Remains to be seen.
Yeah.
Oh,
Matt, I
that's
couldn't
so
give you an
interesting.
answer. I could give you an answer, Matt. I think
That's fair.
I like Keith for trying stuff. I do. I think coaches need to try stuff. And Keith has figured it out. Like, he's juggled lines. He figured out that amazing first line with Domi, Matthews, Bertuzzi. That is an elite first line. He's having trouble figuring out what to do now that Marner's back. I think it's a tough thing for him because, like they said, Nylander had like 95 points at the beginning of April. He played all these games and somehow didn't get to 100. But people also say it's because you're playing him with Holmberg and whoever, right? Now Marner has come back. For me personally, has not looked that good. I don't know if you think the same thing, Darius,
Yep.
but he's been with Tavares and McMahon, who's hurt. McMahon better be back. We're switching to the Leafs side, I guess now. It just happens. But McMahon, who's hurt, the Leafs need, like I said this to people before. The only teams that win cups, they have random guys come up and score 20 goals for them. Pittsburgh did it all the time. Tampa Bay will acquire guys that do that, right? You need guys that come in and score 15, 20 goals. And McMahon was looking like a second-line left wing with Tavares and whoever it would have been. I think Nylander makes more sense. But I just think, even though my only worry going into this, I think the defense is like whatever. We're going to be skeptical about it because it seems like no disrespect to Labushkin or Edmondson, I just don't think they're that great. I don't think they're anything too crazy. I would argue they're bad. I would argue that. I have Labushkin especially recently. Edmondson has come off an injury, so I'll give him leeway there. You have Morgan Riley, who, we know in the playoffs he elevates his game. I think one thing for the Leafs is going to be big, Darius. I don't know if you agree with me. Is Timothy Liljegren in this series and how important he will be for the Leafs with Brody, who's declined. Riley, he's an X factor. Labushkin doesn't look that good. Giordano's declined. I think Liljegren has to step up here.
Yeah, he has to step up, and I think he's going to be in this series to start at least. And I think there's a reason that we're seeing now that Keefe kept him out of previous series in favor of Justin Hall. I think we're seeing it now. Like, he just doesn't look like he's ready for playoff hockey, right? And he makes some really questionable decisions. So he's going to have to step up. He's going to start the series, and I think he's going to struggle in certain situations. I do think he is, but I think it's on Keefe to be like, all right, this is my lineup. Who matches up well against who? You got to figure it out quickly. It's got to be done by like game 2. You got to feel it out in game 1 immediately, right? And you got to have a game plan going forward. So I think he is going to struggle, but I do think he's going to start because at this point, love Brody, and I love what he's done for the Leafs over the last couple of years. He's falling off a little bit, and I just don't know if you can put him in that situation just because they have too many lefties too. And in terms of defense, like you were going off on too, Labushkin has struggled. I think Edmondson's going to surprise everybody in the playoffs. He's going to come to play. I think he's going to be a huge factor for the Leafs. He's going to clear the front of the net. It's been a big problem for the Leafs, and he's going to clear it because you can in the playoffs. We saw him take a couple penalties in the regular season, and he looks slow and all that stuff. I'm telling you, in the playoffs, this guy's going to be a difference maker for the Leafs. It's a good thing that they got him. Just a little puzzling that he shoots left, and they went to get another left shooting defenseman. But yeah, I think it's going to be the defense. I don't know. I think they can make it work, but I think some of them are going to struggle.
Yep. And me personally, a lot of these fans are worried about goaltending. I'm not that worried.
I'm not worried about it.
Yeah, I'm not worried about it. I think Samsonov is going to be fine. And I know Joseph Wool has looked bad recently because, high ankle sprain for goalie, not easy to come back from.
For anyone.
But
Not just for goalies.
No.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting there. But Matt, I'm gonna ask you this first. How much pressure is on 34, 16, and 88 to go deep in the playoffs. Like especially because new GM. They have changed a bunch of the personnel. They have new surrounding talent. They actually have depth scoring. They're more physical. They're more gritty. All this stuff that we wanted has happened. How much pressure is on the big three in Toronto this year to get that shit done?
Like far too much pressure. Like an unexplainable amount of pressure is on those three. Even like if you want to add in like the core four, like with Tavares, like they've been expected to do big things year in, year out, year after year. And aside from last year, okay, they got past the first round and then bottomed out. They were they have the pieces necessary to go deep.
Always have. Always
Oh,
have.
always have.
I
But they
think
just
it's. Sorry, Matt. Go ahead.
sorry, there was a mental hump. There was I keep using that term, weird term, whatever. They got over the Tampa, over the game seven. You got that done. Now it's the Boston part. After that, there really is nothing like in their way.
Exercise the demons. Darius, what
Yes,
were you gonna
sir.
say?
I was going to say that it's not that there's no pressure on them, but I think the dynamic of pressure has changed this season. And I say that because Nylander's locked up. He's not going anywhere. Matthews isn't going anywhere. We know that. This guy's going to be a Leaf
Oh my god.
for
I
as
know
long
this
as they
guy's
would
going.
love him.
I know where this guy's going.
And I think all the pressure, most of the pressure, is going to be on Mitch Marner because we haven't seen it. We haven't seen it, and he's got to get it done now because his contract is up. So what happens after this if you don't perform again? We know where this leads now, and it's you, right? So all the pressure is on him, and I think he's going to be put in a spot to succeed because I don't think he's going to play with Matthews. So I think he is going to be put in a spot to succeed where when they're line matching, he might get favorable matchups because the Bruins are playing their best players against Austin Matthews, William Nylander, and John Tavares because John Tavares, a lot of people talk about him like he's washed. This guy scored a lot of goals this year, and he's a great face-off guy. He's a really good center still. It's just a foot speed thing. He's still a very good player and a good playoff player. So it's going to be interesting. I don't know how the lines shake up too, but I do think also Nylander, for as much flack as he gets and the soft narrative and all this, and Matthews, because of what happened last year, I think the narrative has changed a little bit. I don't think they're scared and worried about certain things on the ice. I think that they now have the confidence. We know how to win, like a round at least, and they're going to go and try and do it again. And the narrative is that the Bruins are going to win, that they're going to mop the floor with you again because you're going to come into Boston, you're going to get scared, and the Bruins are going to win the mental game. Yep. I don't know if that's true because the game changes in the playoffs, and now they've added guys like Bertuzzi and Domi that know how to play that game. Look what Bertuzzi did for the Bruins last year. He was one of the only reasons they even went to 7 games against the Florida Panthers, and they had a record-breaking season. So the game changes, and when the game changes, they have guys who are game changers, and I think that might, I don't know, make a little bit of a difference for them this year. So it's gonna be fun. So I don't know if I wouldn't say there's no pressure. I think the dynamic of pressure has changed.
Marner's still under a lot of pressure, though. I agree with that.
Yeah.
It just seems like it's him that always seems to. His play doesn't. It's not like made for the playoffs. Very perimeter centric. He doesn't get to the net enough, shoot it enough.
But I think sorry to cut you off, but I think you see flashes sometimes where you're like, why don't you do that more? And I think he has to bring that, right? It's like, okay, we'll tap into that. Now this is the time, right? What are you prepared to do about it? Everyone's talking about you this way and that you might be gone in a year. Do you want that? No, then change it.
Darius, he doesn't listen to the media.
Well, that is not true.
Matt, question for you, as an outside fan. Do the Leafs have the amount of physical fortitude bringing in Labushkin, bringing in Edmondson, who aren't the greatest players, but they bring that playoff physical presence? Ryan Reeves now, who has looked amazing recently, he scored a one-timer goal from the high slot the other game. And he's looked great. Domi, Bertuzzi, all these guys have kind of brought, there used to be one guy, Bunting, Hyman, one guy that would, try and fight everyone. Now it's like everyone's in the fray. Is that enough of a physical presence to be formidable against the Boston Bruins, Matt?
Against the Bruins? I think it's the right amount. Like, you don't want to overdo it where, like, you take some of your skill guys out for, toughness, because that never ends well. But I think it's the right amount. Like Edmondson, Labushkin, you kind of need those guys for the playoffs. You can't need, like, 6, puck-moving defensemen. No, you need some toughness.
Of course, I agree. And Darius, I don't know if he'll play much, but my last question, how important is a guy like Nick Robertson in this series?
Not important. I think his contribution to this series will be, barring injury, will be in the press box, and it's not his fault. I think he has a high ceiling offensively. He makes some puzzling decisions still, and it's because he doesn't have the experience, and he has been put in situations that aren't favorable for him. He makes some puzzling decisions in the defensive and neutral zone, which is where a lot of the series is going to be played, I think.
Yep.
So don't put him in there. Just don't. And I don't think it's because he's a bad player. I think he's a fine player. But don't put him in a situation for him to be eaten alive. I think this is common sense. So I don't think his contribution is going to be on the ice. I think it's going to be in the press box.
Okay, what I like about the Leafs this year is, though, like, now when, like, someone gets injured, like, you're not having, like, some dumbass idiot coming in and playing. Like, it's like legit players.
You have a player who can come in and fill the gap. Like, I'm struggling to find a spot for Yarncroke recently where I'm like, oh my goodness, he was injured. Where does he fit in now?
The problem is he has to play because he's such a Swiss Army knife.
Oh, 100%. He'll play. But it's what I'm trying to say is, like, you think about it and you're like, oh my goodness, he was injured. I forgot about that. They've been playing so well with these lines, right? And I think, like Matt was touching on with the toughness, the nice mix. Sorry, Nick, before we go back to you, but they found that great mix throughout the lineup. I think when you look at the first line now, there's a great mix of playmaking, obviously scoring with Matthews, and then you got the toughness, right? And I think Matthews, he'll beat you in the corner. He's not going to go for a big hit, but he'll beat you for the puck in the corner, right?
Huge.
So you have the whole mix there on the first line, and then you move down the lineup. McMahon is an underrated body checker and stick checker, underrated, I think. We know what Tavares can do. Like, he's really good on the boards, all that stuff. You move down the lineup, like, they got guys who can do it, right? And like you said, Reeves might make a difference too. Yeah.
I think Matthew Nyes can be like an X factor.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I do too.
I don't think we mentioned him once, but like, he's so versatile, and he's got much more experience compared to last year when he was thrown into the lineup in the playoffs. Like, from what I've seen, like watching him during Leaf games, like not a whole lot, mind you, but like, he's very versatile, and that's something the Leafs have like needed for years.
I think we just haven't mentioned him because he's been disappeared a little bit the last little while. But I think in playoffs anything can happen. Like, when you look at the line matching, maybe Marner's playing with Nyes and something happens there. You don't know, right? So I think that's a good point, Matt.
Yeah, and one thing I do want to bring up before we get in here, let's talk about the power play and the penalty kill for each team. If we look at the Leafs' power play percentage, pretty high at 24%, but we all know it has been very shit in the last month.
Yep.
It's been terrible. Now the Boston Bruins, they're not that far behind. They're at 22% clip, so you could chalk that up to even. Sure, let's say it's even based on percentages. But the unfortunate part is when you switch to penalty kill, because the Boston Bruins, they are 7th in the league in penalty kill percentage at 82.5%. That's a good clip. Do you guys know the first team that's worse than the Leafs in penalty kill percentage? They're an Atlantic Division team who's not good.
Montreal
Canadiens.
Oh man.
So the Leafs are ahead of the Islanders, worst penalty kill in the league. That's interesting. The Ducks, the Wild, the Senators, the Sharks, the Blackhawks, the Blue Jackets, the Coyotes, and the Canadiens. And after the Canadiens is the Toronto Maple Leafs. They have one of the worst penalty kills in the league. Sandwich that against the Bruins, a power play that's decent, and the Bruins have a good penalty kill. Special teams are going to make or break this series. I know people always talk about wrestling in the playoffs. There's going to be penalties called, important ones. We talked about Matthew Nyes. Takes a lot of penalties, so we need that to stop. So that's going to be important. But special teams are going to be crazy. But I think this series comes down, guys, to Auston Matthews becoming that motherfucking guy, because he scored almost 70 goals, didn't get 70, and he had over 100 points. He was fucking unbelievable this year. He's on a new line with new players. He's rejuvenated. It feels like when he plays with those two, he embraces the physical nature of the game. When he plays with Marner, he doesn't really take control as much as he should.
Yes.
So I think that's what this series comes down to. Can Auston Matthews have an iconic series? And you know what, guys? I definitely think he can, because you look at the centers he's up against. I don't give a fuck about the defensive capabilities of Coyle or Zaka or Boston. I don't give a shit.
Auston Matthews is the best center in this series by a lot.
It's not even close. Not even close.
It's easy, and Matthews has to be insanely good this series. But let's talk about it, guys. Darius, how does this series end?
this series ends with the Leafs finally slaying the dragon, because things are different now. I think last year changed things a little bit, mentally at least for some of the guys. And I think they're really determined to go further, and they knew where they messed up, and I think they added in those areas. And I'm excited to see the new pieces play in the playoffs. So I think that the Leafs finally exercise the demons, and they'll get rid of the Bruins in 6 games on home ice.
Sheldon Keefe said last night he was watching video clips of the Bruins in between the intermissions. Like that's such a baller move. Like he doesn't care about the winning, even if they meet later on. Like he's getting ready for the Bruins. Like mentally, like this is everything for him. Wants to beat the Bruins, and they also do it on home ice in 6 games. But he wants to beat the Bruins, and you know what, Sheldon Keefe, I think he will finally get his flowers.
I don't think Sheldon Keefe has ever coached against the Bruins.
He hasn't in a playoff series. No.
And Babcock.
Yep.
And Babcock and Carlisle, but that was like 10 years ago. I don't care about that. That's crazy too. That it was like almost 11
years ago.
Yeah, but yeah, like you said, Matt. It's gonna be interesting to see how Keefe will game plan against a Boston team. And you know what, guys? You know what's crazy? I'm taking the Leafs in 6-2, baby. Let's go, man. Let's get it. Motherfuckers are scared. I don't give a fuck. I wasn't scared against the Lightning last year. I think we all picked the Leafs to win that series as well.
Yep.
And they fucking did it. And they're gonna do it again. Let's go, baby. Toronto Maple Leafs in 6. Let's slay that fucking dragon, boys. Let's get it. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching the video. And stay tuned for the rest of the playoff series. The Gritcast for me, for Matt, for Darius. Take it easy.
Wait, Matt.
What?
Did you say how many games they were gonna win in? I just took that in.
He's at 6.
Oh, so Toronto in 6.
They're gonna go home. They're going to be up 3-2, and the media's going to be like, oh, they're not going to do it. No, we'll see you 2 nights later in Boston for Game 7. And then Austin Matthews says no, and then it goes into Game 6.
Let's go, Matt.
And then Austin Matthews goes into Game 6 and records a hat trick. That's my hot take.
Wow.
That's the script. The script. It's written. But anyways, guys, we'll see you guys in the other previews. Have a good one.
For more content, visit our YouTube channel and check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Don't forget to follow the guys on social media at Matt_Mondays, at Nick LaFlame, and at Darius Dominguez.